Welcome back, guys. Chris here, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the deduction management tool in NetSuite. This is actually one SuiteApp that you can download for free, and it comes with 3 different tools within it. So there's a deduction management tool, there's a chargeback tool, as well as a small balance write-off tool. So that all sounds great, but what does that actually mean? Let's paint a picture here. We're talking about the accounts receivable department and tools that can assist the accounts receivable department to follow up on and actually receive money back, or even make alterations when payments are made on outstanding invoices. So let's say, for example, that our company has sold, generally this wouldn't be done so much with e-commerce, especially if it's online transactions. You would not use something like that. What we're talking about is more, generally speaking, business to business. Maybe you're a wholesale distributor, for example, and you're doing large transactions with your customers. So let's say our company had a invoice to a customer and it's with $50,000. So they owe us $50,000. Our AR department is now following up on that, trying to get them to pay that full balance. And we'll take the 3 pieces, first starting with deductions. So let's say that they do pay us what's supposed to be $50,000 on the invoice, but because of some situation, there is going to be a deduction on that amount. So they only pay us $48,000. $2,000 is a deduction. And the deductions can happen for many different reasons. Maybe we shipped it to them late, or when they got the product, it wasn't exactly what they were expecting, or whatever the thing was, there's some reason. They might have even just called us and said, they're a great customer. They've bought a certain amount of the item. Can they get a deduction? So the point is, it wasn't a discount that was applied on the original invoice for $50,000. They're now paying, and they're going to pay us less, and they want to have that deduction included. And so they only pay $48,000. There's a $2,000 deduction. So that's deductions. Then you get to chargebacks, which is kind of the same thing, but instead of just being okay with it, we're going to say, no, we're not going to accept that deduction. So let's say the invoice is for $50,000. They try to pay us $48,000. Whether it's an accident, for whatever reason, they're saying we've now just paid $48,000. And what we're going to do is we're going to close up that original invoice and act as if that is now a done cycle. It's no longer an open invoice, even though they've only paid $48,000 of the $50,000. And what we're going to do is we're going to generate a totally new invoice just for $2,000, a chargeback, so that we can continue to follow up with them and have the AR guys go after just that $2,000 as really a separate transaction. No longer considering that original one is still outstanding just because there's a portion that was no longer paid. So you obviously could take that route, but if you chose to close that off, no longer have it as an open invoice, and then separately follow up on that remaining $2,000, you can use that chargeback option. And then lastly, you have the small balance write-off. So that's a slightly different circumstance where, let's say the actual invoice was for $50,023.14. And then when the customer paid us, they only wrote us a check for $50,000. Whether they did it deliberately or was accidental, etc., it doesn't really matter. The point is, they haven't paid the full amount. There's some tiny percentage, or you could say a small balance, that was missing in the final payment. So what happens is, instead of trying to chase up this customer on $23 and change, we're just going to say, listen, it's not worth it to us. We don't want to waste our employees' time. We also don't want to create a bad relationship with the client or the customer who's missed this small amount. Maybe it's cents, maybe it's dollars, really depends on the size of the original transaction. You set whatever threshold you're willing to write off and say, listen, it's a wash, we really don't care. And then you can take those amounts for not just one invoice, but you can take it for any invoices that are under that amount, and you basically wipe them out so you can close off all those invoices and not have any of those outstanding balances. So those are the 3 things. Deductions, if we are deliberately trying to give them some sort of a deduction on a payment. Chargeback, if we're not fine with any kind of deduction and we want to make sure that then it gets branched off into its own transaction. And then small balance write-offs, if it's just loose change sitting around that we don't want to bother with, we can write the whole thing off. So those are the circumstances, and that's how we can view these 3 tools. And using this download, which I'm going to show you how to get to it, you can use one of the tools or you can use all 3. It's totally up to you how you want to apply this module. So with all of that in mind, let's actually take a look at it in the system. All right, so first off, we're going to come over here to the SuiteApp Marketplace just so I can show you what you would actually be downloading. Again, this is a completely free app. You can absolutely take advantage of it. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video was because I found that not only most clients are unaware of this thing as existing and the fact that it's free, but even most consultants don't realize this thing exists. So they take more manual routes to do really what can be quite easily automated with this tool. So we're going to go to Deduction. And as soon as we put that in, you can see right here, Deduction and Chargeback Management. So all you need to do is click on this SuiteApp, and of course it includes the small balance write-off feature as well. You download it, it takes maybe 10 seconds to do so. You refresh your account, and then you're gonna see over on the right here, I'm on a laptop, so it doesn't actually fit on my top center, but you can see right here, Deduction Management. This tab will appear in your center if you're in the administrator role, and you'll have a number of features associated with it. So before I actually get into the setups of deduction management, which is very simple, by the way, I'm going to show you, it's a very quick process, just a few minutes to actually set this process up in the first place. But the very first thing you have to do is you need to have the correct items created in the system to be able to allow for it to work in the first place. So before we jump over there, I'm just going to open up my list of items. And I'm going to show you just a couple of the items that I created that will facilitate this system. So for example, down here, I have a chargeback item. This is an other charge item that I created. So I made an other charge item. I called it chargeback item. I also created other charge items for shipping deductions. I did one for a volume rebate. I also did another one for a small balance write-off. So you can do either an other charge item. You can also do a non-inventory item if you want. It really just depends on the circumstance and which one is preferable for what you're doing. But in this case, another charge item was perfect for my requirements. So I created those. So those are already existing as items in the system, which again, it takes just a matter of minutes to create those items. Very basic. Once those items are in existence, now you can come to the configuration of deduction management, which is we're going to come up here, we're going to go to setups. The first thing I'm going to show you is the types. So what you need to do, you have the item sitting in there, then you're going to come in, you're going to make your, obviously you won't have any types here when you first download the app. You're going to come in, you're going to make whatever types you need. So if you're using, keep in mind, you can use one of the three or you can use all three or any combination. It doesn't matter. So in this case, I have all three listed out here. But if you knew you were only going to be using deductions, you could just make a type for whatever deductions you think you would commonly use. So in this case, I have a shipping deduction. I also have a volume rebate. If I had 9 different deduction types, I could create all of those here. You know, maybe there was one for angry client or whatever the circumstance is. You could have all of those listed out. Let's open up one of these just to get a concept of what goes into it. And in here, you can see we have very basic. You can see we selected the type of the 3. We gave it a name. We had to connect it with that item that we created. We associate a subsidiary, and that's it. It's really as basic as that. And of course, this is identical for the other types that I was just showing you on that list. So I'm not going to go through each one of them. I think you get the idea. You can very, very rapidly set these up. Once you have the types created, then you come back over here, Deduction Management Setup, and this time you're going to go to Deduction Management Setup. So in this case, I know it looks a bit funny as if there's nothing existing here. It doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't come with a title. Generally speaking, you would only create one deduction management setup. And so the fact that there's a list is unnecessary. You'd really come over here and you'd hit new, but I have one already created. So we're going to take a look at that. Again, very, very straightforward. Basically what you have is on the top, this is for small balances. You can select it on or off, depending if you're actually going to use that element. And if you're going to be using deductions or chargebacks or both, you would click this enable feature. Once you've selected that, you're simply going to select what's the default deduction. So if you feel like shipping deductions happen more often than anything else, you can select shipping deductions. Then you select your default chargeback. In this case, I just have one, so the default is going to be that one chargeback. And generally speaking, there is just one style of chargeback. I mean, very infrequently would you have a circumstance where you'd want to have more than one chargeback type, but you can create more if it suits your needs. And then you would have notes. So in this case, this is for accounts receivable, so I've noted it as such. If you have anything more specific, you can include that information down here in the notes. And there's also a credit memo note. So when you have the small balance write-off, which you can see here, the credit memo that gets created as a result of that, you can have a note that gets included with that. And that's it. That's literally all that goes into the configuration. That's your items they created, the types, as well as the setup overall. Once that's all in place, which again, you can probably do in about 10 minutes, once you have that all in place, now you can start putting this into action with your payments. So let's come back to the home dashboard, just to come back to home base here. And I'm going to come up here to transactions. I'm going to go down to customers, and I'm going to go to accept customer payment. So in the example I gave earlier, remember it was $50,000 was the original invoice. So let's say that company's now trying to pay us for that, and we're going to walk through a couple different examples, starting with deductions and chargebacks. They're only going to pay us a portion of it. So now let's see how that would look. So I'm on this payment record, and I'm going to select a customer. So in this case, I'm going to select Abbott Inc. All right, so now we have this page loaded. We're good to go. So you can see our info popped up for Abbott Inc. And we're going to come down here. So you can see here with Abbott Inc., we have a number of outstanding invoices. So it looks like we've got about 9 listed out here. And let's just select 2 at random. Let's say we've got these last 2. You could do 1 or 5, it really doesn't matter. But let's say we were receiving a payment for these last 2 invoices here. And if I scroll over to the right here, you can see it automatically fills in the full value. But let's change that. Let's say instead of it being the full value of $2,418, let's say they're only going to pay us maybe $2,410 on this one. And let's say for this one, they're only giving us $5,000. Okay, so we now have 2 invoices that have a discrepancy between the original invoice and what they're actually paying us. So once we have that selected, we can come up here and notice we were on the Apply tab, but we can come under this Deductions and Chargeback tab. If I select that, this is where we can start really mapping out how are we applying these deductions and chargebacks. So I can come in here and I can manually select whatever invoice I want. In this case, I think it was these last 2. But instead of doing that, you can actually automate this. You've got right here, auto apply deductions. It knows we've just selected 2 invoices. So all we have to do is hit this. It pulls in those 2 invoices, and because of the setups that I already created, it knows what our default deduction and chargeback accounts are. So it automatically applies them. It says, okay, good, you're $8 off on this one invoice. It is a shipping deduction. And good, we've got our little note here of accounts receivable deduction. And then for the second invoice, it was $120. Again, it provides that default. Let's say that we didn't want to use shipping deduction on the second invoice. We can change that to volume rebate. Maybe because they had purchased so much that they are eligible for an additional rebate. So we go, okay, great, you're going to get that. We're going to take $120 off your bill. They've only paid us the $5,000 and we're going to write off the whole thing, or not write it off, but we're going to deduct it so that it's fully complete. So that would be one example. We could also do this where we allow this one to come in for the full amount. And maybe this, we're going to, let's say, do a volume rebate for $100 and we're going to do a shipping deduction for another $20. We could split this out. So let's say we go in here, we go 100 for this. And then I'm going to add another line for invoice 347. And this one's only going to be for $20. And that's going to be the shipping deduction. So now we have that full $120, but $100 goes to volume rebate, $20 goes to shipping deduction. The point is you can really get manual if you need to customize how these things are being broken down, but it will provide you that easy option of auto figuring out what you have. And I want to give one additional example. We're actually going to remove this one. We'll take this up to 120, but in this case, let's say we're actually not fine. We'll have that just as shipping deduction, but what we're actually going to do is we're going to say, no, this is a chargeback. They only paid us $5,000 and they tried to claim that they're going to get a shipping deduction on that. But because of some circumstance, we are going to maintain that they need to pay that remaining $120. So we're going to click chargeback and it automatically has the one chargeback type that is already defaulted, which is the standard chargeback. So with this all set up, we're going to hit OK. So we've got everything here. You can see we're doing a normal deduction on the $8. We're doing a chargeback on the $120. We've got everything we need. So with that in mind, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hit save. And just like that, we have that payment now created. So we've got our payment record, and let's see what actually happened underneath the hood when we create that payment using those deductions and chargebacks. We can scroll down here now, and you can see under applies, we actually have the 2 invoices that were related to this payment. So let's actually open both of these up and take a look at some of the things that happened underneath the hood by including these deductions and chargebacks as a part of these 2 invoice payments. So you can see we have, let's take the first one. So right here, paid in full. Even though it wasn't technically paid in full, because we included that deduction element, it now considers the full or the original invoice fully paid. And if we come down, you can see under related records, payments, right here, you can see we've got one payment record for $5,000. And in this case, we also have a credit memo for $120. Because remember, even for the chargeback, this is obviously the invoice that had the chargeback, even though there was a chargeback, so it separately created a new invoice to that customer for $120, which I'll show you in a second. But on the original invoice, it still had to wipe it out and say it was fully paid. So it does the $5,000 for the payment, $120 for a credit memo. If we go to that credit memo, you can see just the basic info included and relevant to that credit memo, including the actual line on there. You can see here, credit memo source, it came from a deduction. So we've got all the basic relation information related to the credit memo. If I close that, that's everything that we've got. So that's kind of what's happening underneath the hood. We've got that payment record. We've got the credit memo that was generated. If we'd split it up for one invoice into 4 different types of deductions, we'd see 4 different credit memos here, each one relevant to that original other charge item that we created, whether it's a shipping deduction or volume rebate, etc. We could see all of that information here. So that I believe was for the shipping deduction, and we're gonna go to our second invoice. So this one was, again, it's paid in full. This was for the $8. So you can see for a total of $2,418. If we come down here to related records and we'll go to payments, I know I'm going through this quickly, but it's just a mirror image of what I just showed you. And in this case, you can see we have $2,410 that was considered payment received, and then we fully applied a credit memo deduction for the remaining $8. If I open this up, I think this was also shipping deduction. I don't think I ended up doing one that was volume rebate. If I had one with each one of them, each credit memo would have a different title underneath it. So now you can see what happened with the payment, what happened with those credit memos, but what about that invoice for the chargeback? Let's take a look at that. So we're gonna actually come back up here, and then under deduction management, we're gonna come over here to records, and I'm gonna click on review records. So if we click on that, it brings us to this page. Now, obviously I've just basically set up this deduction management tool for this demo account. So we only see these 2 things that we just enacted. If this thing was running on your system, you'd see a long list of every single instance that there was a deduction or a chargeback relevant to the system using obviously this tool that we've now implemented. So in this case, you can see these were the original invoices. These are the new payment records. These are the credit memo records that were created. And for this one, we can also see, you can see chargeback invoice number. So it also created this invoice. If we go to that, you can see it generated a new invoice for $120 to that same customer. This wouldn't just come out of the blue. Your accounts receivable department would be in close touch with Abbott Inc. to make sure that they're not shocked to find a new random bill in their mind for $120. They would know it's coming. They would know that if they were trying to get a deduction, they got turned down for that. And this is really just a separate invoice, so their accounts payable guys would know this is exactly what they have left to pay. So they could go through this process, make sure this final amount is paid. So that's really the simplicity of it from a deduction and chargeback standpoint. Now let's take a look at the small balance write-off. And first we need to do a quick configuration. We already did that original setup, but there is one additional element we need to add. So we're gonna come in here, we'll go to deduction management, and under setup, we do need to come to write-off limits. So we'll click on that. Now I have already created a write-off limit, so we'll just open that up and take a look at it. And you can see here, we've got really just 3 things you put in. You say, okay, what is the currency? Because basically what you're telling the system is at certain points, we're gonna run a script, and that script is gonna run using these 3 parameters. It's gonna look for any invoices or payments that are relevant based on these parameters. So the currency is US dollars. We then have the amount limit. We're basically setting what do we consider a small balance? So here we've specified that it's $10. If we only want it to be $1, so we're only gonna accept anything that's change, then we would set it as $1. So that's the amount limit, is just clarifying what is that little balance that we really don't care about. And then the percentage is saying, okay, well, anything that falls within that limit, so let's say it's under $10, are we gonna write off the whole 100%? That's generally speaking what you do, but there might be circumstances where you might wanna write off half of it and have the other half not written off. Again, that's a pretty niche case. Generally speaking, you're specifying the small balance because you want to say, I want to write off the whole thing. I don't want anything left over. So we would almost always leave that as 100%. So this would have to be configured first. Now, once this is done, now let's do a new payment. Let's set up a circumstance that would fit this parameter, and then we can basically do that small balance write-off. So we're going to come up to transactions again. We'll come down to customers. We'll come up here to accept customer payment. We're going to do this exact same setup. We're going to choose the same customer. So I'll come in here, I'll select Abbott Inc. again. And it pulls up Abbott Inc.'s info. We're going to again come down. We've got all the remaining invoices. So I'm only going to choose one here. You can see this one for $10,560. So obviously we need to modify this in a way that's within $10. Otherwise it's not going to get caught. So you can see 10,555. Again, maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe there was cents left over. Maybe they did it intentionally for some reason. They like rounded numbers. Who cares? The point is we're fine with this. It's within our tolerance limit of how much we just don't care about. Oftentimes you'll set it either daily or more often weekly, so that once a week it looks at all the payments that have come in and the invoices attached to those and goes, okay, which of these were these tiny balances that we don't care about? Now we're going to bundle all of them together and we're going to do write-offs for everything at the same time. Not that there won't be separate transactions, but the process of doing the whole write-off, that can all happen at once, generally with a scheduled script. So how do we apply that script? It's not like you need to be a programmer. It's very basic. Once we've got this payment, so this is just one, we assume there would be many more built up over time. And we're going to do this on demand in this case. We're going to come up here to customization. I'm going to come down to scripting. We're going to go to scripts. So when we downloaded that SuiteApp, Deductions Chargeback Mgmt, it actually added a script as part of that. So we now need to find that script. So we're going to come under custom, and I believe it was custom DC. So, or custom script DC. So we're going to come down and it should be in here. Okay, and let's do a search here for, I think, write-off. That'll probably come up. So this is write-off limits. That looks like exactly what we want, but I just want to double check. No, here we go. DC small balance write-off. This is the one that we're looking for. So this was a script specifically added when we got that SuiteApp. And what we do is we come over here to deployment. So I'm just going to leave this on screen for a second so you can take a good look at it, make sure that you understand this is what you would be looking for in your list of scripts. You click on deployment. And it's not something I named. Again, it comes naturally when you download this. So I haven't actually deployed this, not a single time. Generally speaking, again, if you had it on a weekly cadence, you would see the results of that. So in this case, because I haven't done it yet, we're going to go to new deployment. And this is all very standard. We have the title listed up here. Down here, we can come to the schedule. So I'd set this up as a weekly event. I want it repeating every week, whether I do it on Monday, Friday, etc. I can specify all the details. The same kind of scheduling setup that you can see on a lot of different NetSuite tools. And under parameters, you can see we're going to specify the subsidiary. We want to specify what is that write-off type. So I already showed you, in fact, I think I still have it open. I have these write-off limits set up here, and I set up a whole management system for that, which I showed at the beginning of this video. So I'm selecting that. I'm not doing anything unusual or anything crafty kind of behind the scenes. This is all stuff I already showed you earlier in this video. I can add an additional credit memo note if I want to. In this particular case, I don't feel that's necessary. And we do have some other instances, things that we can do up above. So in this case, it's set for not scheduled. I do want to have that as scheduled. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up to save. So I'm going to save this script deployment. And now that this is saved, I'm going to come back to it under edit. So I would have this going on a weekly cadence, but in this case, I want to do it on demand. So I'm actually going to change it for a second to not scheduled. And we'll come up here to save under the little arrow button, and I'll go down to save and execute. So this is where I'm doing the manual execution of that. And you can see it now has it processing. So obviously, if you had many invoices, many payments happening, it would be sifting through all of these to find them, make sure they're in the tolerance limit, and then have those things written off, which you could refresh and then see how all of that works. So that's how the tool looks and works in the system. Now, I want to give you a few additional tips and warnings in relation to the deduction and chargeback tool. Now, first off, keep in mind that if you have a lot of different deduction types, And especially if you're really breaking out, like one invoice might be broken out into 10 different things with different deduction types. It's not like you can't utilize this tool and that it won't still be helpful, but that auto-populate feature and really the highly efficient aspect of using this tool, you start to lose that a little bit if you're getting really into the minutia with the deductions. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Secondly, if you have a tendency to import your payments into using CSV imports into your NetSuite account, then you're not going to be able to utilize this particular tool because it needs to be applied as you're doing the payment creation in NetSuite. So if you just batch import a ton of payments at the end of each week, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of it. So there's another thing to keep in mind. And the tip I have for you is if you're looking at implementing deductions and chargebacks for your company, get together with your team ahead of time before you actually download the app and work out for yourselves what is your actual policy regarding deductions and chargebacks. You should have that all very well codified and worked out and known about internally in your system before you bring this tool on. Because what this tool is doing is it's really automating and making the process more efficient. So before you can do that and utilize it appropriately, you want to make sure you have full agreement and workout from yourselves about when do deductions tend to happen, when do you like to pursue a chargeback process with the customer, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. If so, please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And with all of that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.